Benvinguts aquells que us incorporeu ara. Aquesta és la primera taula rodona del dia d'avui. Recordar-vos que ara es parlarà en anglès, per tant, si necessiteu traducció simultània podeu agafar un aparell. Recordar también que hay traducción al castellano en el canal 1 and into English number 2. Bé, aquesta primera taula rodona es titula Una mirada diversa i sobre aquesta qüestió ens en parlaran, jo us els presento, no sé si molt per l'ordre, aquí tenim la Rosemary Smith, que és de l'equip de podcast de Day Europe, al seu costat hi ha el Gordillo, director de Catalunya Ra i que exercirà de moderador d'aquesta taula. Tenim també el Graham Dixon, que ell treballa a l'European Broadcasting Union, welcome. Tenim també el Karlsson, ell és vicepresident de Triton digital, després ens explicarà què és això, welcome. I aquí al meu costat tenim el Ronez, que ell és cofundador d'una empresa que es diu Binge Audio. Binge? Ho he dit bé? Binge Audio. Molt bé. Doncs endavant, Saúl, moltes gràcies.
Bé, bon dia, buenos días. Damos inicio a la jornada de Podcasting Out con el título Una mirada diversa, a variety of different viewpoints about audio on demand. El objetivo de esta mesa es intentar adivinar o tener pistas de qué está sucediendo a nivel internacional en relación con los nuevos escenarios del audio. En este sentido, los invitados en esta sesión de lujo aportarán datos sobre el consumo de sonido en diferentes formatos y para diferentes soportes, principalmente en Europa y en Estados Unidos. También contaremos con la mirada de creadores de plataformas y de certámenes europeos de podcast, como Binge Audio y Podcast Day Europe. Y así hoy nos acompañan, como ha comentado la compañera, Graham Dixon, director de radio del European Broadcasting Union, Ronez, cofundador y productor de Binge Audio, Karlsson, vicepresidente de Desarrollo de Negocio de EMEA-APAC de Triton Digital, y Rosemary Smith, del equipo organizador del Podcast Day Europe. El orden sería Rosemary, Graham, Joel y Daniel. Y por tanto le doy la palabra a Rosemary, que tiene entre 15 y 20 minutos para hacer su intervención y luego desde el público podréis formular preguntas.
Hello, good morning. My name's Rosie Smith. I work for Radio Days Europe, which is the largest international radio event in Europe, but we also run a podcast day, which will be held next week in Copenhagen. So this year, the themes that we're seeing in the podcast world include getting your podcast started and being successful, monetizing your podcast, reaching podcast listeners and who's listening, formats and content, the future plans of many of the main broadcasters with regard to podcasting, and how smart speakers and new voice-controlled devices will affect podcasting. These themes preoccupy the podcasting world. However, there's some other thoughts I'd like to share with you about podcasting. Innovation. Next slide. Last year, the main word at Radio Days Europe Podcast Day was innovation. Podcasters are the new innovators in radio. For example, Griefcast, which just won the British Podcast Award in May, discusses the subject of grief with comedians. Also, Much More Matador, the podcast in Denmark, discusses only the most popular TV series in Denmark. So you have comedy, TV, grief. These are all topics which wouldn't normally be commissioned by traditional radio. More and more podcasters are leading the way in terms of innovative radio content. Podcast audio on demand has allowed podcasters more freedom than traditional radio. Podcasts can be shorter, more specific on any topic, and produced by anyone. James Cridland, in the latest podnews.net, noted that Apple Podcasts now have 550,000 shows, podcast shows, with 25,000 of these added since April 30th. That's a lot of innovation. Another area where podcasting is interesting is equality. If you've been to many radio conferences, as I have, you can look around the room and you'll probably see, and I'm very sorry for the stereotype here, older white men. And this is a truth in radio that's been faced for quite some time. Podcasting events, and I'm happy to say that I can see some ladies in the audience today, are changing this. I'm the person responsible for equality at the main Radio Days event, which was held in Vienna this year, which has some 2,000 people attending. Sometimes I struggle to try and get women on the stage to talk about different topics. Different reasons for that: time away from home, not senior enough to travel, intimidated by all male panel members, that kind of thing. Next week in Copenhagen, however, we've got more women on the stage than men. And last year, we had an equal number of women and men in the audience. So is this a new era for radio? What's attracting women to podcasts? Many podcasts are focused on women and women's issues. From Edison, the podcast consumer report in 2016, it said 44% of listeners to podcasts in the US are women. Women listen to podcasts because, like radio, podcasts are lean back, but they can also be paused when life gets in the way. The Guilty Feminist podcast had 8 million downloads in 15 months from 2016 to 2017. Women like podcasts. Audio on demand fits into busy lives. On the production side, women are also creating successful podcasts. Sarah Koenig's Serial was the fastest podcast to ever reach 5 million streams and downloads on iTunes, and Spotify is currently funding the Sound Up Boot Camp, a week-long intensive program for aspiring female podcasters of colour. And they see the potential in this new area of radio. As one of the women speakers at Podcast Day said to me last year, I started podcasting because every time I walked into a radio station, I was pitching to men. My work wasn't getting commissioned. I don't get that in podcasting. Next slide. Inclusion is also new for podcasts. Non-radio brands, for example, Der Spiegel Online, are creating successful podcasts. But is the success of non-radio brands a threat or opportunity for radio? Branded podcasts are a growth area and are now considered to create a greater connection with the listener than a TV advert or radio advert, according to EGTA's study on podcasting in 2018. Some of the most successful branded podcasts are from high spenders in the ad world: Tinder, Define the Relationship; MasterCard's Forever Favours the Bold; Microsoft's Future and the Hunt for Truth; and McDonald's The Source, Slack Work in Progress. Also, at the British Podcast Awards, the Discover Adventure from Land Rover won gold in the podcast section. The quote in the opening of the report from EGTA is from DAC, and it says 77% of advertisers and agencies agree advertising in podcasts represents an untapped opportunity, while 66% of marketeers will experiment with advertising in 2018. It's not clear yet how advertising will affect ad spend. A final thought on this is from Ray Martin of Radio Today UK. A podcast is a radio programme without the restrictions of regulators or rules. This is a good thing for inclusion, but without rules, could podcasts become a problem? Who could or would regulate them? Seeing the opportunity in podcasts is also another area which we as a radio event have seen growing in the last year. In 2018, the Edison Research and Triton Digital Research said that podcasting continues to grow. 44% of Americans 12 plus now say they've listened to a podcast which is up from 40% last year. For me, an interesting area of growth is the in-car listening, which has gone from 18% to 22% of Americans. I know myself from meeting with automotive manufacturers within Europe that listening to podcasts in the car is starting to influence their thinking about radio in the car. This is especially important for broadcasters right now. Acast announced that they were getting podcasts into all new Ford cars at this year's Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. Will we see podcast replace the radio button in the car? Most radio departments now have a large podcast department. However, investment is being made in podcasting. 2 million podcast users in the UK don't consume any BBC radio at all. Bob Shannon said at Radio Days in Vienna in March that he was going to employ a new commissioning editor for podcasts. This has been done. His name is Jason Phipps. He formerly was of the Guardian podcasts. Also, podcast network Wondery announced that they'd raised $5 million in funding in March this year. Investment in podcasting is growing and offering new business opportunities. And finally, podcasting is breathing new life into radio with new content, new formats, innovation, through equality, by being inclusive and by providing new business investments. I hope you enjoyed today's event, and if you want to hear more about podcasting, join us in Copenhagen next week. Thank you.
Gracias. Me he olvidado de presentarte antes. Rosemary Smith ha trabajado durante los últimos 15 años en la promoción de estándares de radio y de televisión digitales. Actualmente trabaja como freelance en Radio Days Europe y es miembro del comité ejecutivo, además de ser la gestora de comunicaciones para la conferencia World App como gerente de proyectos, con especial énfasis en sistemas de infotainment y funciones de radio en el coche, como ahora comentaba. Rosemary trabaja a nivel internacional y su conjunto de habilidades especializadas la ha llevado a asumir proyectos para una amplia variedad de compañías, desde Fitbit, organizando The Fitbit Challenge, hasta clubs de fútbol de la Premier League que investigan nuevas fuentes de ingresos. No obstante, su principal amor es la radio y ahora el podcasting. Ahora le tocará el turno a Graham Dixon, que es el jefe de radio de la Unión Europea de Radiodifusión en Ginebra. Fue director gerente de la BBC Radio 3 hasta septiembre de 2015. Anteriormente ocupó diversos cargos editoriales y de producción en la BBC Radio. Mientras estaba en la BBC, presidió el grupo de música de la Unión Europea de Radiodifusión y el grupo de usuarios de Euroradio. Su papel actual incluye la promoción de medios de comunicación públicos, específicamente para el papel positivo de la radio en la sociedad. Está comprometido en el fomento de la innovación radiofónica, además de promover contenidos distintivos, genuinos para todos los públicos. Después de pasar tiempo investigando música barroca italiana en Italia y Alemania, obtuvo un doctorado de la Universidad de Durham. Mientras trabajaba en la BBC, Graham respondió al cambio del entorno mediático estudiando un MBA. Eso le llevó a recibir un galardón como distinción por su trabajo sobre la transformación digital, preparando la producción de radio al reto de la entrega multiplataforma. Graham Dixon es miembro de la Royal Society of Arts y de la Royal Asiatic Society. Cuando quieras.
Thank you very much indeed. I hadn't expected that all to be read out and hear the sins of my past, like doing a PhD on Italian music. It's like seeing my whole life before me in a few sentences, which is quite scary. But look, now I am head of radio at the European Broadcasting Union in Geneva. The European Broadcasting Union is the major organization for broadcasters, radio, television, digital in the world. We have 73 members in 56 countries, and beyond that we have associate members really taking us around the world. So our aim is to be the voice of public service media, and actually also to look at really positive and good ways of collaborating with commercial media as well. Because in the radio sector, I think we can say we're all in this together, and we're successful together, or we fail together, because actually the way in which the market is changing means that really collaboration is the name of the game. And I'll come on to that a little bit later when I talk about my real subject, which is about podcasting. Before I start, I should just say thanks to my great colleague David Fernandez-Quijada, who runs our research area at the EBU. I think he may come from somewhere near here, and some of you may even know him. David is a fantastic colleague, and actually it's him and his team who have put together the research that I'm going to present to you. But when it gets to discussion, the opinions are all my own. So, on-demand listening. And I always think it's important to remember why we do this, and those are listeners. Human beings who want to be entertained, who want information, and want to feel a sense of connection with society. That's the motivation. So it's quite good to look at them for a moment and think, why are we here? Why are we actually doing this? But moving on to on-demand, we can see why really should we be discussing it at all? Because if we look at these statistics, which are the ones from the UK, where I think the statistics about this type of area are the most detailed, we can see that actually 79% of listening is really to what I would have called radio when I was a child, 3% only to podcasts, 1% catch-up. So in fact, podcast is a very small part of a very, very big radio universe. But I think it's really important to notice just how the world is moving. And a bit like, had we been in the United States 200 years ago, we might have bought our bit of land eventually to build the house on. Now, I think it's important that we are making advances with podcasting, with on-demand, in order to actually be with this definite flow, this definite tendency, which is getting ever larger. Audio on-demand reach, from the perspective of Spain, it's quite interesting. The on-demand reach in Spain is extremely low. And these are David's figures, not mine. David's figures, who comes from here, is extremely low in comparison particularly with the Nordics, with North America, and of course the UK as well. It's very much that type of Nordic and English-speaking world phenomenon, at least for mass market at the moment. But clearly, I think things will actually catch up. And if you see where Spain is now, the opportunity, particularly, I've heard of a fantastic new podcast which has been launched, Catalunya Radio, this week. Is that type of thing going to move the whole market on for everyone? But that's the situation at the moment. But it seems to me that something is happening, and these are American figures, which is basically showing that the mobile device is taking over from the fixed computer. And actually, if the mobile device for listening is taking over from the fixed computer, it seems to me that the possibilities for hearing podcasts are getting even greater. However, let's be realistic. This is the American population. This is a slide that Mr. Trump himself would be proud of. This is the American population. Here we have the American population that listens to radio, and here we have the American population that listens to podcasts at the moment. So actually what this shows is that in a developed market, yes, it is reaching a certain proportion of the population, but actually there's still a lot of growth potential. Interesting, though, to split this by demographics. And we see that the youngest demographic here, I forget the exact I'm afraid I forget standing up here the exact divisions, but the young, the middle-aged and the older, actually consumption during a month actually differs vastly. And if you as media providers, radio stations, media organizations want to be targeting younger audiences, you can see this sort of 30%, 35% in the younger demographic for podcasting, and in the States, still in the mature market, only 13%. So it is actually a way of answering this big question that, heavens, we spent so much time discussing this at the BBC. When I worked there, how do you attract younger audiences? This is again 6 major markets across Europe. We can actually see that across Europe and the United States, and we can see they're really different in terms of the way the market is divided between public, commercial, and podcast native. We can actually see the enormous success of podcast native, for instance, in the United States, also in the UK, public radio at about a quarter there. Unusually, in Spain, we can see the enormous success of commercial radio in the area of podcasting. And on the other hand, in France, amazing, we are at 66% public radio providing the podcasts which are consumed. So it just shows that different countries are developing in different ways, probably as a function of the strategic decisions about the importance of podcasting made in particular media organizations. As you see, commercial radio in the UK is only 2%. And, you know, that's interesting. I think that's probably because there might be a reluctance in commercial radio to move into something that doesn't give them an immediate revenue stream, whereas actually for public radio, it's about the reach and the share that you can actually get and touching as many people as possible without worrying about the financial aspect. So why do audio on demand? This is from our members, Public Service Media. They're interested in, it's probably a little bit small for you to read, but the main interest for them, our members, are about more output on genres which are not served well in the linear offer. So it's actually reaching different people with different interests. But also there's something, an experimentation. 69% also like the idea of podcasting because you can test and promote new formats. And I think that's really interesting as an area for experimentation. We then get still on to tests. In the next down, it tests new topics. You can try new subject areas. It tests new talent. So there is something really about experimentation and a laboratory here for developing new ideas. And then what actually are PSM doing here? What are they actually offering? And which genres do they think work? Well, interesting here, full radio programs. I think you'd expect that from PSM, but excerpts from programs. We were talking last night how people are now finding program sections, for instance, that they could broadcast at 2 o'clock in the morning when there's a regulatory issue that you can't make new material for podcast. You actually broadcast something late at night, which then becomes a podcast. Or you divide your program into a more modular way, so you can say, okay, this is a 2-hour program, but actually if we have 20 minutes here, we can make that into our podcast. So full radio programs, program excerpts, really important. And then here we've got news, current affairs, right at the top. I was at a news conference for radio news bosses in Brussels on Monday, and it was one of the things I said to them was, you know, we hear the news every day, but actually what people want is context. What people want is an idea of the history, how we got here. And maybe this is because a podcast will never be news in the sense of today's news. This here is actually a way in which we're getting breadth and depth. And it's interesting from my own BBC experience that sometimes the podcasts which have really worked are those that are giving more depth and the ones that actually you might think were quite difficult on air, but people, when they have a quiet moment, will actually take that and listen. So I think it does open up some massive new opportunities there. So what should be the reaction of traditional radio companies to all of this? Well, I think we have one problem, which is that much of radio, in fact, I can tell you it's 46% of radio output of EBU members is music. But actually the problem is the alignment with this, because 46% of music will need a lot of rights negotiations to be offered on demand. And in some countries, that would seem to be it certainly wouldn't be allowed because of the negative impact on the commercial music industry. So there is a problem there. Music's important for radio, but actually you really can't do music. The other one that I think is sport, important for radio, important commentaries, say for a football match, but actually it's not so interesting 3 days afterwards when everyone knows, of course, that Barcelona has won again. So what do you do about these things? There are some imaginative solutions. For instance, how do you get music rights? Well, you organise your own concert. Where do you get your hall from when your budget might be limited? You get your artists to perform in your offices. And here you are, National Public Radio in Washington, having what they call the desk concert when the musicians actually come into the office. And of course they get the rights and they do 3 or 4 small tracks, and it's unique material, because how do we work in the world of Spotify? It has to be through unique material and live performance. Here, closer to home, Podium, a great portal site. You don't actually have a classical music station, but actually opera is a world that's important, and actually the stories here behind the opera, understanding the singers, all of that is something which you're able to do, and that's not really related to your broadcasting of operas, because that, as I understand it, doesn't happen. Sport, again, let's be imaginative. There are a few solutions. Looking back a couple of years, but even a couple of years ago, Deezer itself, obviously, normally, if you like, an aggregator, an intermediary for content, is actually here making a podcast for Euro 2016. And here we have ESPN making sports documentaries about the history of sport, events. So there are ways around it which actually supplement and give depth to the actual live event, which it's more difficult to represent. I think we need to think about that. But sometimes we actually... I've just mentioned this again as another example, which is, I would say, core, particularly for some public stations, that actually this podcast, I forget the figures in France, someone around me might know, but it's very, very much listened to. And the interesting thing is that this proves that where you've got a good podcast, well marketed, it actually massively expands the audience. 3 million? 3 million downloads a month. So serious, I think. And I'm one of those 3 million because it's really, really good. The question, though, is that when our members say they want to explore new topics, and I think this is a real challenge of podcasting, there'll always be someone who does something even more specific, even more niche. So, how many of you radio broadcasters have programs about law relating to animals? Do you have them weekly? Do you have them monthly? Or maybe you don't have them at all. So, there is a question here. If you're fanatical about animal law, there will be a podcast for it. If you're fanatical about collecting coins, there will be a podcast for it. And I think it's very difficult for big media organizations to actually compete with that, or even to make the strategic decision to serve those niches. But it's clear that those niches and many thousands of other niches that we can't even imagine will also be fulfilled by the podcast marketplace. Collaboration. I'm going to come on a little bit to collaboration before I finish, but it's interesting that podcasting in a way brings people together. Here you have two established broadcasters, the BBC and the Norwegian public service broadcaster, together producing a podcast. But actually it goes further than this. Lovers Hotel, for instance, is produced by Italian-speaking Switzerland in collaboration with Amazon. So what we are finding now is that sometimes the public media is actually collaborating with some of the major technology companies. Likewise here, Bayerischer Rundfunk, Bavaria, in Munich, that is Bayerischer Rundfunk having a competition together with Spotify for great stories. So it's an interesting and evolving world how this all goes. And of course here we can see, and I'll just do this quickly, that the big four, or four of the big four, Audible, Spotify, Google and Deezer, are really seeing that there is future value in the podcast world of moving in and making their offer. And I think for existing organizations, the question is whether you do your own thing, you remain separate, or whether you actually collaborate. Because as we can see from this, which I will quickly display, that actually these major players are really present in the podcast market. To actually get a podcast to an audience, normally you are going to pass through one of the different distribution major players, in many cases, of course, iTunes. And of course, some also control the devices. It's not my subject today, but it often is my subject to talk about the impact of smart speakers. We have an entire family of them at home. We have 3 different types of Amazon Echo, and we have a Google Home. And actually, I must say, when it is launched here, fully launched here, as it was in France yesterday, it does change your life, and it changes your media consumption. The good thing is that you have time, because it's not available in Spanish yet, a little bit of time, or Catalan, a little bit of time to prepare. But platforms and collaboration is a dilemma. So we asked our members, why would they want to use their own platforms, or why should they be putting material on third-party platforms? And 2 years ago, we had a big debate. I think Joseph will remember this at the Radio Assembly, when they were split right down the room. It was like the Brexit vote. Half of them said, collaborate with Amazon, collaborate with Apple. The other said, no, we have to have things on our own platforms. And I think that's a really ongoing debate. And you can see it on this slide, that of course, when you use your own platform, you've got a strong sense of your brand, you've got a sense of exclusivity, you've got a strong control over what you're doing. But the moment you're collaborating, those things go away, but you can open up to more people. You can also potentially lose the sense of your brand. So on either side, there is a really big debate, and you can lose control, but you will reach a larger audience who will discover what you do. And I think that's really is the dilemma for existing media organizations at the moment. And I should say, 2 years ago, the colleagues were at our radio assembly, our meeting for directors of radio, were really split. I wonder now, 2 years later, whether actually they would be feeling more as if they should be moving in the direction of collaboration. But just seeing which third parties our members work with is quite interesting. 21 of our members answered this part of the questionnaire, 26, and we can see that 21 of them work with Apple, and then all the other intermediaries, much, much less. SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify. It really does actually go down, although I should say that the numbers now for the last 2, Amazon Echo, Google Home, will clearly have gone up a lot, since this survey was made only a year ago. And in fact, we had our first meeting for specialists on smart devices in Prague 2 months ago, and there were 40 colleagues there, all really concentrating on what do we provide for Amazon Echo and Google Home. This is the option, potentially, for bringing together and being your own aggregator and having your own portal. It doesn't mean that you don't actually work with other third parties, but maybe this is a sort of home place to which you could aspire to bring people. And I think it's been done extremely well by you, by some of you in the audience, with Podium and Prisa, where there is that fantastic sense of portal that's refreshed, updated, always offering new material. So that's not a third party, that's actually being your own distributor. And of course, I don't think there's an easy answer to this, which is why I show you that slide again about the platform dilemma, whether you do it yourself or distribute elsewhere. I suppose just in conclusion, this is a really emerging area. It's an area where people are taking great initiatives. It's an area which, as Rosemary's just been saying, actually opens up to voices that haven't been heard, the space to actually meet an audience. And I think that's really fantastically important. It represents a democratization of audio, which is again really important. And I see this as becoming part of a really vital and vibrant ecosystem of audio listening, which will include the small providers, those who have money to invest in journalism and travel and on the public service side, and also the commercial and commercial, local and community radio all having a role to play, because actually when we are functioning together as a sector, I think then the radio ecosystem is really functioning very well. And that's really what I would say, collaborate and create a fantastic sector. So we go back to audiences. That's to remind you why we are all here. You probably don't need reminding. Personally, it's good always to be reminded that actually those are the people that we're aiming all of this at, and actually playing this really important role that radio has in their lives. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Graham. Le tocará el turno a Joel Ronez. Es productor independiente y creador de medios, presidente de la red francesa de podcast Binge Audio. Anteriormente fue director de nuevos medios de Radio France del 2011 al 2014 y de Arte entre el 2008 y el 2011. En estos cargos desarrolló la innovación en producción no lineal con documentales interactivos galardonados y la distribución digital para empresas de servicios públicos de difusión, aplicaciones móviles, nuevos servicios editoriales como RF8.fr y ArtLife Web. Es tu turno, Joel.
Hola, y disculpadme, mi castellano no está muy bueno. Es porque prefiero hablar en inglés. So mainly I'm going to speak in English. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to tell you today why I, as a former director in a traditional radio, I moved to a 100% digital media. So the main reason of that, in fact, were my kids. Liselott and Ferdinand, it's 14 years old, 9 years old. Just let me tell you a short story. We were in a car, we were driving, and I was listening to music, and my kid, my son told me, why it is the same singer, in all the tracks? I said, yeah, this is a David Bowie album, So the other, 1 hour later, we were listening to the radio, and he asked me, who is the singer? I said, I don't know. said, yeah, but you have to look at, press a button or something. I said, no, it's not possible. There is no information about that. Half an hour after, he told me, oh, can you go back? I want to listen to again, I say, no, I cannot go back. This is broadcast. And, and at this moment, I was still on the radio. I was director of a radio, and I say to myself, I have a radio in every room in my apartment. I listen to the radio all day long, and my own kids, they don't know how to use this media. So there's something that doesn't work quite good. And I look on my son's mobile, and I saw that he looks video. I say, okay, what kind of video it is? I say, yeah, it's a YouTuber called Squeezy. I look the guy, say, oh, he has 5 million views on this video, and it has been released just 2 hours ago. I said, it's huge, it's crazy. So I realized at this point that they didn't have the same kind of culture of the media as me, and maybe if I wanted to connect with them with my job and my passion, because I have to do something on that topic. So let me, and after that, later, I created Binge Audio. I'm going to give you an example of what we do. It was less than 1 year ago. I came back in the house with a connected speaker with Google Home. And if we can play the sound on the next, here is what's happened. You say, okay, I put this on the table and let's do something. So I don't know if we have the sound. I have to check that. No, we don't have the sound. Just if there is. No. Attends, je vais faire un truc. Sinon, on va faire comme ça.
Ok Google, tu peux mettre la Macarena?
D'accord, je mets Teta, Macarena de Damso sur Spotify.
Ok Google, est-ce que tu peux... Ok Google, tu peux mettre Macarena?
Votre Google Home est connecté à Internet. Il télécharge et installe automatiquement les mises à jour disponibles. Excusez-moi, je n'ai pas compris.
Ok Google, tu peux mettre la Macarena de... Los del Rio. Los del Rio.
Et là, c'est le bug.
Ok. Ok Google, est-ce que tu peux mettre Macarena de Los del Rio?
Ok, vous allez écouter Macarena de Los del Rio sur Spotify.
Okay, we succeed at the fourth attempt, so it was, attends, voilà. It was, okay, but since then I said, okay, we have to understand how the people use, without any, guidelines, this kind of device, what they do with that, and so on. It's why, for example, I show you a video we shot yesterday about the custom skill on Alexa, because Alexa has been released in French yesterday, and the Binge Audio content is inside. So I just show you how it looks like.
Alexa, ouvre Binge Audio. Bonjour, vous êtes sur Binge Audio. Souhaitez-vous écouter un podcast en particulier, le podcast du jour ou la liste des émissions? No fun. Hop, écoutons Playboy Carty, le gimmick roi. Playboy Carty et Pierre Bourne reviennent avec un album encore plus musicalement audacieux, expérimental et alternatif, qui confirme que le rap est bien devenu une musique électronique. Un podcast de 30 minutes.
So just to show you that when we create Binge Audio, we were, in fact, a podcast network, but We said, okay, we are more than that. We produce audio content and we distribute that everywhere. So it's from my former position in Radio France, I leave the job with two feelings. One was a conviction, and the other was there's, I don't know how to withdraw that, but no. Bon, c'est pas grave, on va laisser le truc au milieu. Voilà. So, conviction. Conviction is that when you create good content, the people, the audience listen to that. We say, okay, this is internet. Everyone wants to have short content that they can share. They want viral videos. They can share to friends and things like that. They want tweet in 140 characters. The thing is that you cannot sum up all the complexity of the word in 140 characters. Sometimes you need length. And it's why what the audio offers to the audience is length. And you can explain complex things with time. And it's why the people like our program. And I also looked at my kids, and I saw that they were consuming Netflix. My daughter is watching, she's binge watching. It's why we call the company Binge Audio. During 10 hours a week, some good content. And why? Because it's premium quality content. It's it's designed for this kind of distribution. And also, it's because it has been, there's a merging between the kind of content and the ergonomy of the distribution. This is my son, I looked at him, for example, how he used the application and things like that. It's the voice we heard on the video. Here is when he wants to look at video content. Here is the kind of ergonomy he has. So you have to choose simple things, small amount of text. Here you have graphic design content with a small amount of choice, with an algorithm that gives you suggestion and things like that. When you go, on iTunes, on Apple Podcasts, here is the pain in the ass that we have. My son doesn't want, if he compares, the two kind of proposition, I understand why he doesn't like to listen to catch-up podcast with this kind of application. Apple Podcast, who is representing 40% of the audio consumption of our content. So the conviction is when you're making good content, the people are listening to that. And also I had a frustration who was that first problem is that the audience of the radio, and especially the public radio, is old. The average, for example, age of France Inter, the first radio in France, is 55 years old. And not only, the listeners, also, the managers, editor-in-chief, they are 55 years old. I was in the executive committee of Radio France. I had 41 years old. I was the youngest guy. And when I say youngest guy, because there were no women at all in the 8 people sitting in the room. So it's why we said, okay, we have to do something else. Here is my team today. Most of the producer are 25 years old. It's mixed. We have still a lack of, visible minority, black people coming from elsewhere. This is something we work on that. But, for example, most of our producers, we are going to produce a show about the sport legend. They don't know who is John McEnroe, for example. So it is funny. We have to explain obvious things like that. So the other thing is that also I found the other frustration was that we were slow. In fact, when you run a radio, you want to go somewhere, you have to go with a truck, 5 people, 9 people. It takes ages. Our studio today, we are our studio in our backpack. we can go everywhere very quickly, very easily, it's cheap. And also the last thing was that we had the lack of cultural territories concerning the young audience. I mean pop culture. In the public radio, you have plenty of show about, you know, the author cinema we have in Cannes. But in fact, nobody in the theaters, they don't go to see that. They go to see, you know, crap Avengers movie, and we don't have the critic. We don't have, you know, enough editorial content regarding this content, regarding the hip-hop music, etc. It's why we create Binge Audio. Here is three kind of program we have. First is true stories. It's very important to say also that we were inspired by the narrative, approach, really American. I mean, like a story, character, something happened, like cliffhanger in our main narrative series, which is a superhero. Here, you know, there's cliffhangers. It's 10 times 10 minutes. So we have a completion. 95% of the people who start at the first episode go until the end. The second kind of program is news and society. So investigation. We have also talks about specific content with, and also pop culture. The third one is really important. We have a talk about music, cinema, and for example, a talk about the YouTube economy, which is very important today. Here is a small other program, and just to tell you about, for example, on the news and society part, we have this program which is really representing what we are, which is called Les couilles sur la table. That means bollocks on the table. It's a name you can easily remind, and it's a feminist program about the man. It's presented by a girl who wants to explore the manhood and the figure of the man in the society today. The only problem we have with this program is to find a sponsor, you know, because of the name, but it's quite okay. We have a program about the sport, about the vegetal inside the cities, about relationship between men and women, about food, etc. Just to give you a few figures, we actually are at 700,000 monthly downloads, all platforms together, and it's representing 100,000 subscribers. And since the beginning, it's 7 million total downloads. To give you an idea, in the last quarter, we upgraded the number of monthly downloads by 62%. In terms of business now, just to give you how we finance that, mainly with two different different approach. The first one is advertising, but it's not programmatic, it's host-read, like it's the host of the show who just read something that is there's an incarnation of the message. So it's 10 seconds or 30 seconds length. Also, the advertiser, the client, the customer buy the show. He doesn't buy on a platform of advertising where he doesn't know what he's going to buy. So there's a really high price for that. It's beginning to increase more and more. Also, we actually, the main other way of earning money is producing content for other. I mean, we make brand content for our brands, and also what we can call executive production, so content that we sell to other media or companies that distribute it through their own brand. On the first kind of brand content, let me explain very quickly. It's content that are financed by a brand or a media who pay for that, but where they don't give any I mean, they are not taking any decision on the editorial process. We decide everything before, and after that, we do the job with our independence, I mean, in terms of hiring the skills, doing the job, and after that, we distribute it with their brand. All this, to give you an idea, I cannot give you the total amount of money because of actually confidentiality discussion, but we made on the first quarter of 2018 the same turnover that the whole last year. So the problem we have today is to manage the content of the demand we have with the different customers. Yeah, and mainly, this is few examples of a program we do. For example, we did a spin-off, it's a drama with Universal Picture. When they released in France the movie with, about Churchill in the 3rd of January, with, I don't remember the guy who won the Oscar, but we made an audio spin-off, 6 times 8 minutes, with original script, and we release on Apple Podcast and all the podcast platform. We also have a weekly show we sell to a bank. We also have some other program, but and we made a lot of. The next one is made with Médecins Sans Frontières. It's on the corner here. It will be released the 20th of July. So we work also with the City of Paris, with University of Paris-Saclay, which is a big university in the south of Paris. We work. It's interesting. The last example I will give you. University of Paris-Saclay, La Bonne Graine, who could be translated as the good seed. We are in the 3rd season now. Season is 8 episodes of 6 minutes. And it's a story about how the people learn during their life until, the university. So each time is a different student. And the university wanted to make value about what they teach, and they order, twice a year a new season for that. And the last one we released the 20th of June about Médecins Sans Frontières. It's a work we did about a specific thing, which is migrant under 18 in a specific place. So it's a really emotional narrative series on a place next to Paris. And you can find everything in binge.audio. I will, end with this quick guidelines for our podcast. I will say incarnation is the same thing as a traditional radio, in fact. You have an host, but the thing is that we ask the host or the hostess to be really different, radical, to be, it's not, we have to for example, we can allow, defaults like something different. We want to have something really different than the radio. The second thing is a meeting, much more than an interview, a conversation. So 2 people talking together. It's not people who has somebody who visiting her in a studio and he asks questions. So we have the listeners has to be in this moment where 2 people meet together. I would say also having to tell a story, so narrative content, a line that bring you somewhere. If you look at something, my kids, and with this, they still look broadcast TV, only where the program they cannot understand what is going to happen next. They look at The Voice, they look at football matches, they look at Koh-Lanta, I don't know, because they don't know what's going to happen next. Because it's a story, in fact. It's storytelling, pure storytelling sometimes, not for the sports, but, and it's the same for the podcast. We try to connect them with narrative tension. And the last thing is simplicity. For basic reason, we are poor, so we don't put a lot of money and time on programs, so it has to be simple. And it's like, I would say, invisible editing. No sound landscapes and things like that. So the editing, every element on the program has to be justified. Otherwise, we throw it on the bin. So the voice, small, sounds, not too much, specific musical elements, that's all. And it has to be dense, it has to be short, and it has to be with emotional density. Thank you for your attention.
Gracias. Vamos acabando. El último participante de esta mesa redonda, Daniel Karlsson, con más de 2 décadas de experiencia en industrias de telecomunicaciones, Internet y audio. Actualmente es vicepresidente de Desarrollo de Mercado de Triton Digital. Antes de unirse a esta compañía, trabajó para Atlas Telecom, lanzó VSAT Interconexiones GSM para toda África Occidental, Turquía, Chile y Filipinas, donde finalmente ascendió a director. En el año 2003 fundó Bigbor, un negocio de consultoría para telecomunicaciones internacionales, e-commerce y contenido móvil. En 2005 cofundó GameTel, una empresa de juegos para móvil en Australia, con oficinas de apoyo para clientes y desarrolladores CMS. Es tu turno, Daniel.
Gracias. ¿Puedo intentarlo en español o English? Any preference? Español, catalán no puedo. ¿Intentamos en español? ¿Mejor? Muy bien. Lo que no sé es cómo abrir el fichero. ¿Tenemos un técnico quizás que pueda ayudar con el ordenador que no es mío? Bueno, mientras que... ¿Eso es un HDMI? ¿Usamos mi ordenador? Excuse me. Aleluya. Podemos empezar, qué bien. Entonces, gracias por la invitación y la introducción. Yo trabajo con Triton Digital. Solo un slide para hablar de Triton, para que sepáis un poco quién somos. Es una empresa americana que se dedica a todo lo que es tecnología online audio. Tenemos clientes en unos 45 países en el mundo y somos un poco menos de 200 personas en total. Y somos presentes aquí en España. Lo que ofrecemos son 3 productos distintos dentro del ámbito de la audio online, que es la medición del consumo de audiencias, luego la parte de publicidad, de hacer inserciones de cuñas de audio dentro del stream online, y luego también la distribución, el streaming. O bien el software solo o también la parte de ancho de banda. Entonces, hacemos esto hace un poco más de 10 años. Con la parte de medición tenemos una posición bastante interesante para ver cómo va evolucionando el mercado del consumo de audio online. Lo hacemos ya casi 10 años en Estados Unidos con un producto que se llama Webcast Metrics. Y es algo parecido se hace ahora en España, hace 3 años lo hacen en Alemania, y lo que es en breve, medir todo el consumo online. Es decir, no mezclar la parte FM con la parte de consumo online, solo la parte online. Y esto entonces lo hacemos hace un poco menos de 10 años en Estados Unidos, pero también en mercados en Latinoamérica y en los 45 países donde tenemos clientes que son por la mayoría radios, pero también pure players como Anjami y hemos trabajado con SoundCloud. También tenemos la medición. Y por eso tenemos este slide para decir que we have a midfield seat. Es decir, tenemos una buena vista del panorama del consumo. Y el consumo es obvio, está aumentando, ¿no? Lo que sí es interesante de ver es que aquí tenemos el consumo del live streaming. Es decir, consumo de radio simulcast, pero también de productos como Spotify, Pandora, y hay unos cuantos más. Pero lo que no incluye es lo que nos interesa hoy, es el on-demand listening en sentido como catch-up radio o con podcast. Y eso es una necesidad enorme para que esta industria pueda ser rentable, ¿no? Porque si no hay medición, los anunciantes no van a tener una confianza alta para investir en este media. Pero la buena noticia es que el IAB, Internet Advertising Bureau, han desde diciembre pasado ya puesto en marcha una iniciativa con un protocolo para definir cómo se debe medir el consumo de podcast. Entonces estamos en ello. El producto Webcast Metrics que tiene Triton, por ejemplo, ahora tenemos Podcast Metrics. Y la idea es poder ir a L'Oréal, por ejemplo, y decir que hay tanto consumo en este país y si queréis también llegar a los oyentes que están en modo podcast o en catch-up radio, ahí está la audiencia y que se puede comparar. Bien, otros datos que os pueden interesar. Vemos que en Estados Unidos hay unos 13% a día de hoy de consumo de la radio en modo online, en comparación con el resto que está en FM. Esto es un dato que va creciendo, pero lo que está interesante es que no representa todavía 13% de la compra de publicidad. Está todavía arrancando. Y Estados Unidos es el mercado el más maduro en el mundo hoy a nivel de audio online. No obstante, tenemos ahora números, ingresos que están creciendo. En 2017, por ejemplo, hemos visto que ya hay $1.000 millones y medio de revenue. Mitad, un poco dentro de los FM simulcasters y la parte pure players, que son sobre todo Pandora y Spotify y Stitcher y nosotros. Y la tendencia que es interesante anotar es que se va ahora a aumentar de manera más rápida. Entonces hay un empuje, ¿no?, en ese sector. Y vemos que la compra de audio representa hoy en 2017, perdón, $1.000 millones y medio, pero eso también se va aumentando. Bien, Rosemary y Graham han hablado un poco del Edison Research. Eso es un research que Triton participa. Somos patronizadores, sponsors del Edison Research. Y es algo interesante también porque se hace ya hace casi 20 años, según este slide. Y vemos un poco la tendencia de la escucha de audio, aunque hoy el enfoque principal es audio en modo podcast. Creo que es interesante ver un poco la historia con el consumo tradicional, que es en radio FM, y cómo cómo esto está evolucionando. La escucha está aumentando, eso es un dato que es obvio. El estudio lo hemos hecho en Estados Unidos, pero también en Canadá y en Australia. Y eso también supone que es un movimiento que es un poco global. Y lo que vemos es que son muy parecidos estos tres mercados que geográficamente, sobre todo con Australia, por supuesto, son bastante lejanos, ¿no? Lo que hemos visto con nuestros estudios, comparando con años pasados, es que en 2017 hay un aumento importante en la escucha de los pure players. Pure players, es decir, no las radios que hacen un FM simulcast. Y esto es una tendencia que corresponde quizás más al mercado americano, donde la calidad de la radio es de menos calidad quizás que en Europa. ¿Por qué? Porque hay mucha publicidad y matracan con la publicidad de una manera bastante americana, no sé. Y eso es un hecho. Hay también el fenómeno de satellite radio, donde hay gente que están dispuestos a pagar $20, creo, par mes, solo para tener radio sin publicidad. Y eso creo en Cataluña, en España, en Suecia, yo soy sueco, no lo vamos a pagar, ¿no? 20 euros al mes para solo escuchar la radio. Pero bien, esas son tendencias que vemos en Estados Unidos. Ahora, cosas interesantes. En 2008, solo 4% de la gente que estaba en este estudio decían que no tiene radio en casa. A día de hoy, 2018, un tercero, 29% ni tiene radio en casa, no tiene FM, no tiene AM. No incluyen los coches, porque todos los coches tienen esto, entonces el estudio ha excluido la parte de radios en coches. Pero eso es un dato que me parece es una alarma, ¿no? Para si queda todavía gente que piensa que la radio puede sobrevivir en su modo de FM solo. Obviamente estamos viendo cosas que dicen que, por lo menos por los oyentes más jóvenes, no es el caso. Canadá, lo mismo. No es un fenómeno Estados Unidos solo, ¿de acuerdo? Australia vemos cosas parecidas también. Luego el fenómeno del smart speaker, muy interesante. 18% of households de americanos tienen un smart speaker en casa. Eso es enorme. El smart speaker ha salido hace unos años solo, es algo bastante nuevo. Y casi un cuarto de la población americana ya tiene un smart speaker en su casa. Y para nuestra industria, que sea de los podcasts o de la radio en vivo, eso es algo que yo pienso personalmente va a tener un impacto muy importante y positivo para aquellos que van a invertir para tener el acceso a su contenido en los smart speakers. Lo que ha dicho Graham es muy interesante. Es verdad, hay una elección importante de elegir o bien ponemos en todos los de distribución o solo en un walled garden, ¿no? Para que el consumo solo se haga en un app o en un player del publisher. Pero evitar totalmente los smart speakers hoy creo que es algo que comparte bastante riesgos. Y ahora que ha salido en Francia y entre poco creo también en España va a salir el smart speaker, yo de hecho personalmente tengo uno en casa y lo usamos en inglés. Y veo mis niños, yo tengo una niña que tiene 2 años y medio, yo la hablo en sueco, mi mujer en español, y la niña, la chica la habla en inglés, está hablando un poco para tener 2 años y medio, pero con Alexa habla. Con Alexa habla. Dice, Alexa, play Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star. Y Alexa se pone a jugar. Y es interesante ver cómo evolucionan también los niños a esta edad. Tengo otra niña que tiene 9 años y veo una diferencia entre cómo ella consume y percibe la tecnología, ¿no? Esas pantallas táctiles o el consumo de audio. Y veo que mi hija pequeña de 2 años y medio ya está desarrollándose más rápido que mi hija que tiene 9 años. Es decir, ella de 9 años ya es una vieja, ya es una generación que no es la generación la más joven, ¿no? Y creo que los smart speakers es realmente una fuente muy interesante. Luego hay la inteligencia artificial, todo lo que se puede hacer con esto y tiene dimensiones impresionantes, creo. Bien, ownership and comparison. Esto más o menos vemos que se ha lanzado en Estados Unidos y Canadá poco después, pero como Canadá es parte francófona que habla francés y la otra parte inglés, se ha retrasado unos años, creo, entre los dos, y Australia también es bastante recién. Pero yo personalmente no tengo dudas que los smart speakers, y digo smart speakers, no solo hablamos de Google Home y de Alexa, hablamos de esto también, un móvil que entre poco va a ser un smart speaker. Porque al final, ¿qué es? Es un altavoz con un micrófono y una conexión red a 5G. Vamos a tenerlo todo parte. Estaba en Dubái hace 2 semanas para ver a clientes y he comprado un Nokia 8110. El antiguo Nokia que tiene esa forma, como un plátano. Lo han salido ahora en modo 4G. Cuesta $60, creo. He pagado $60 y eso es impresionante porque cuando estaba pensando esto, tiene una batería que es como casi un mes. Estaba pensando que al final los teléfonos ahora 1.000 euros que valen una fortuna, esto es para los ricos. La gente que realmente va a usar el consumo de audio es más el perfil de la gente que pagan 50 euros o 100 euros. Y todo lo que vemos ahora en los smart speakers se va a ofrecer en los devices más adaptados, ¿no? al mass market. Cosas interesantes. Y lo que hemos visto también entonces en los smart speakers, ¿qué hacen la gente? ¿Qué van a consumir? Pues obviamente audio, porque no hay pantalla. Y lo que vemos es que, número 1, es la música. Número 2, news talk. Eso son el fuente natural, ¿no? de las radios. Número 3, los podcasts. También interesante. 1/4 de la población americana tiene un smart speaker. Y 20% de estos escuchan podcasts. No es un fenómeno niche o algo que quizás va a funcionar o no va a funcionar. No, va a funcionar, ya está, es una realidad. Lo que ahora hay que hacer es medirlo y monetizarlo para que se pueda ser rentable. Eso es el desafío que Triton por lo menos estamos intentando trabajar. Wiki Podcast Listing Comparison, no hace falta entrar en los detalles. Aparte de confirmar lo que Joel ha dicho, es decir, que es un modo de consumo que es mass market y que tiene un futuro bastante obvio. Lo que vemos también es que la escucha por el ordenador, como tengo aquí, este no funciona, se va reduciendo. Ahora es más esto, los smart speakers, la nevera quizás, o lo que sea, cualquier device que tiene un micrófono, un altavoz, una conexión a Internet. Estamos ampliándonos a muchos lugares, ¿no? El coche, por supuesto, ahora que dentro de poco no vamos a tener el volante, ahí es un modo de consumo muy interesante. Bien, hay una pequeña diferencia entre Canadá y Estados Unidos, quizás por razones de diferencias de los smart speakers que se dejaron, no sé, pero bueno, eso tenemos los datos. En Australia también vemos unas diferencias y poco más porque quería intentar llegar a los 15 minutos. Lo que también quería deciros es que tengo un compañero, Manuel González, que está al centro, que él sí habla catalán. Entonces, si tenéis preguntas sobre
no hay problema con la
lo que
lengua.
hacemos, con mucho gusto Manuel os atenderá. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, pues ya hemos acabado las intervenciones. Creo que es una mesa de lujo que se ha complementado bastante y que nos ha dado una visión bastante diversa, como decía el título de la mesa. Nos acompaña gente de radios locales y de proximidad, gente de radios privadas, radios públicas, periodistas, profesionales, estudiosos, o sea que entre el público tenemos gente de mucho nivel también. Y les cedo la palabra si alguien quiere hacer alguna pregunta, si alguien quiere plantear algún tema concreto, que se identifique, por favor, y que diga quién le quiere hacer la pregunta. Aquí, no sé si tenemos un micro.
¿Qué tal? Voy a intentar hacer la pregunta en inglés, a ver si soy capaz. You said some interesting things about young people and women being represented in podcasting more than they are being represented in traditional radio. I have to say that I participated in Radio Days in Vienna, and I shared the stage with 2 women talking about sports. So I think you did a pretty good job representing women there. And about young people, I'm 32 years old, and I'm hosting several podcasts right now. I've taken a look around, and I think that I'm one of the younger people here, if not the youngest one. So I want to ask you if you have seen, seen any new trend about young people being more represented in the podcasting scene than in traditional radio, because as you said before, Joel, young people are not being represented, or maybe not well represented in traditional radio. We're losing track among young people, having some competitors as Spotify, for example. And I don't know if you have seen something different in the podcasting scene that may take us to think that we have a good opportunity to regain young audiences right now with podcasting.
The thing is that we are, the truth is every radio public commercial has since 1 decade that the young people, instead of entering the media as me, I was born in 72, it's the radio was the media of my youth. But if I had Spotify at 10 years old, it was sometimes I regret that. I see. I waited until 32 years old to discover Frank Zappa, for example. I said, if I had done that, younger. So it's why today the young people, they don't enter in the radio as we did, and they go somewhere else. For the music, Spotify, Deezer, YouTube, mainly YouTube. And they don't know yet that they could need, podcasts. So it's also, it's not done. We have to do the job to convince them. It's why we distribute podcasts on Spotify, Deezer, YouTube. We do, for example, 15% of the audience of our podcast on YouTube. Because we do editorial, tagging about the most successful podcast is a hip-hop show, because there's a lot of video clips and hip-hop artists on YouTube. So we try to be where the people are, and it's why when we created Binge Audio, we decided to be 100% digital, and it's sometimes a default because we don't have as a broadcast people that are already here, but we have to take them by the end one by one. And it's an advantage because we are the culture of taking the people one by one. And to the figures we have today, 75% of our audience has less than 35 years old. So it's what we plan. We said, okay, we are not going to compete the radio where the radio is strong. So we are working on the young audience, 18 to 35, but that doesn't exclude the other. We don't do yet millennials and kid program. We are going to do this later. And we, on the figures we have today, the first step is done. We have, most of the audience are under 35. But it's a challenge that you have to cope with every day, because you have to give them good reason for that. Every day we receive mail and comment on the Facebook pages that say, oh, I discover the podcast, I discover your podcast, I didn't know how it is. It is complex, which is a paradox, in terms of distribution, to listen to audio content online, even for the millennials. Because you have to download an application, cope with a bloody RSS feed. I try to do something else at the RSS. I said, okay, let's go viral for the sound. Let's go on SoundCloud. Let's go somewhere else. In fact, the best efficient thing is to make the people subscribe your RSS feed through Apple Podcasts or an Android application. That's the rule. So we said, okay, let's do that. Let's keep the people in a feed as a YouTube subscription, but they don't understand the linear radio, they understand the subscription, YouTube subscription. So they can understand the RSS subscription, and after that, they receive the content they are subscribing.
Just quickly to add, I think as someone once said, I think the death of radio is a little exaggerated, but at the same time, I don't think we should be entirely calm about it. So, I think we're at a very, very important moment, because the reach of radio is holding up amongst young people, but the hours listened to is declining. So I think this is actually, for those of us who are representing or working with traditional radio, I think this is a very, very important moment to think, how can we actually transfer and keep those listeners that at the moment we still have, to a greater or lesser extent, I should say, in many of the countries that I represent, and actually how do we transform them into whatever radio becomes in the future. So I think it's an interesting moment, but I should also say, without doing this from memory, because I don't want to, that there is enormous variation between countries, and that some countries have certainly launched extremely successful projects for young listeners, and for other organizations that has not been so much of a priority. When I say projects, I mean programs.
Can I just say, I'm just going to say one thing on this as well. For young people, a lot is to do with devices. So young people don't traditionally go out and buy an old style radio. They do all have mobile phones in their pockets. So the podcast device is as much a part of this as anything else, and young people very much understand how to use their phones, how to use their tablets, and podcasting is perfect for that. So I think that's one of the reasons that young people will come, and I'm talking not just young teenagers, I'm talking Fun Kids in the UK is now launching very young children's stations, and I know across Europe, lots of people are now launching podcasts for smaller children because of also the length of the podcast. You can't keep a very small child entertained for 20 minutes, but 5-minute children's podcasts. So I think there are big opportunities to bring very young children in, not just young people. So we've got a future. We're building audiences for the future.
Albert Cuesta.
Yes. I thank all the speakers for the excellent insights. That I have a request for all of you, which is make the slides available somewhere, because the bottom half remains hidden behind you and the table. Besides that, I have a question for Graham, another one for Daniel. For Graham, it's actually a detailed question, which is, you mentioned some research data. For instance, the podcast drivers vary across markets. I would like to know if that refers to number of podcasts available, or number of listening hours, or number of users. What's the metric?
Oh, that was the audience. That was audience engagement. So when it was those circles, you
yes.
mean? Yeah, that's the utilization.
So it's the number of hours.
Yeah.
That's good. And for Daniel, you mentioned that one of your children speaks to your smart speaker in English, even if that's not her regular language. My question is, how do you think the availability of languages in these kind of interfaces is going to affect the usage of it? Because I'm talking specifically about Catalonia. Cortana, Alexa, Siri, and Google Assistant are not available in Spanish, and some of them will be, but none of them will be available in Catalan. Do you think that's going to affect negatively the usage of online audio?
I would argue that the question is not whether Catalan is going to be available in smart speakers, it's when. It's not if. It's a question of time. Catalan happens to be a smaller language group than French, for instance, so, Google, they're not stupid, and Amazon, they're going to focus. Although it was interesting that Amazon, they went with German before French, because there are more French speakers in the world than German speakers. Maybe that's because Amazon have their head office in Europe and Germany. I don't know, but that was an interesting phenomena. But to your point,
it's a thing of the.
Sorry?
I think it's a question of the algorithms.
Perhaps
the English algorithms work better in France with German than with French.
Perhaps, yeah. Although I speak some German, and it's pretty hard, the language. They have some funny things with the verbs, but yes, that's perhaps the explanation. But I do think it's obvious that they will be available in in all languages, all main language groups, including Catalan, at least the mainstream operating systems. And to the point of my daughter, she actually does speak some English because my wife is Spanish and I'm Swedish. The lingua franca is English. We speak English at home, so she is exposed to English. But it's amazing, I find at least, how she's been able to catch on and communicate with a piece of plastic, with her being 2.5 years old only and not really speaking full sentences, neither with myself in Swedish or with my wife in Spanish. So that's an interesting trend.
So, could I just add this? I mean, you hit exactly a problem, although which actually we are really concerned about at the European Broadcasting Union, really on behalf of the whole industry, because although I was brought up speaking English through an accident, and probably with Brexit it is an accident of birth, that is not the world in which I wish to inhabit. I want to inhabit a world with diversity, languages, and there's a real problem of this, of the English language and the sort of economic benefit that launching in English gives compared to the economic benefit of, say, at random, launching in the language of another of our EBU members, namely Slovak. So when are they actually going to get to Slovak is the question. And one of the things that we've been doing as the European Broadcasting Union on behalf of members is developing a very close relationship with Amazon, with Google, and actually pointing out some of these issues. What's interesting at the moment is the workarounds that's happening. For instance, the Dutch speakers in Belgium are trying to write Dutch as if it was English in order to make it possible to speak and ask for particular radio shows, which, you know, there are all sorts of works going on. And even for English speakers, it's not easy. If you buy, I'll just tell you a little anecdote. If you buy an Amazon Echo in Ireland, Amazon imagines that Ireland is the same, let's say, area in terms of sales. So you take it out of the box in Ireland and you say, Alexa, play Radio 1, and it plays BBC Radio 1, not the local public service broadcasters RTE Radio 1. When you then want to ask for RTE Radio 1, the Irish will always say RTE and not RTE, and I'm afraid that the Amazon Echo does not recognise or as R. And so even when you're speaking English, there are massive questions, and questions really are fundamental about diversity and cultures. I took also one to Radio Days Africa in Johannesburg, and a really nice guy from the audience just said, yeah, it's wonderful, but it sounds like you and not like me. And, you know, so this raises all sorts of cultural problems, and I'm really pleased you raised that, because I think we should keep this absolutely as a priority in terms of preserving the diversity of European cultures.
¿Alguna pregunta más? Tenemos que ir acabando. Muy breve, por favor, y dirigida.
Tengo una pregunta con respecto a las emisoras locales, pero veo que el tiempo es largo y si me prometen darme el tiempo en la próxima ponencia, como el tema es parecido, la hago. Si no, la hago ahora y nos estamos un rato más.
Vale. Haga una versión corta ahora y si no queda resuelto, lo plantea en la siguiente mesa.
Vale, lo dejamos para la siguiente, pero es de las emisoras locales, que no se nos olvide.
Vale, pues muchas gracias. El último tema que se ha planteado creo que es interesante porque en Cataluña, precisamente, en cuestión de 10 años, el impacto de la radio en catalán ha doblado su audiencia. En Cataluña casi un 70% de la audiencia, según el Estudio General de Medios de FM, es en catalán. En 10 años la oferta pública y privada ha llegado a 1.700.000 oyentes. Eso es más del doble que hace 10 años. Y yo creo que un reto que hay es que esta fuerza de la radio en catalán, en Cataluña, con el tiempo también pueda ser un reflejo en el entorno digital y en el podcast y en la radio por Internet. Desde la radio pública hemos hecho un esfuerzo, como antes comentaba Graham, y gracias por comentarlo, de lanzar contenidos exclusivos digitales y específicamente de podcast, y esta semana hemos arrancado esta serie de no ficción de Thor con bastante éxito. Y yo creo que si en la medida en la que las audiencias se puedan computar y se puedan medir también para realidades tan pequeñas como las de las radios locales o las de la radio en un país como Cataluña, que tiene la dimensión que tiene, yo creo que aquí también tenemos que tomar nota. Es un reto que creo que asumimos desde aquí los medios de Cataluña a partir de esta mesa, y a ver si de aquí a un tiempo se vuelve a organizar y podemos traer resultados y objetivar, y si encima pues hay algo de negocio o de financiació, pues ja seria la bomba. Per tant, hem acabat el temps, hem començat una mica més tard, però jo crec que dintre de tot encara ens hem ajustat. Ara hi ha una estoneta per fer un cafè, per si algú vol parlar específicament amb ells. Moltes gràcies a Rosemary Smith, a Graham Dixon, a Joel Ronez i a Daniel Karlsson per haver compartit amb nosaltres el coneixement, l'experiència i aquest temps. Moltes gràcies també a vosaltres, al públic assistent aquí al MAC de Granollers. Ara fem aquesta pausa, s'inicia després una taula molt potent amb el títol Els podcasts radiofònics, una nova oportunitat per a les emissores i cadenes. I res, gràcies a Josep Maria Martí per muntar això i per convidar-nos a moderar-ho. Bon dia.